Mayor, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, very good. In that case, it's 5:01. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Monroe,
Still having trouble with that mute button. I'm here.
Councilmember Coomer,
Here.
Councilmember Carling,
I'm here.
Vice Mayor Warner,
Here.
Mayor Marchand.
Here. Okay, very good. Thank you. Tonight is a special meeting workshop. This meeting is being conducted pursuant to provisions of the Brown Act and the recent executive orders issued by the governor to facilitate teleconferencing to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission at public meetings. The city of Livermore has met all of the applicable noticing requirements, and the public is welcome to participate in this meeting. Tonight, we are using the YouTube platform for comments. Let's see, it says Zoom, but I presume since we, yes, okay, so this is the Zoom and the YouTube platforms. Members of the public can participate by submitting a written public comment through the Zoom Q&A feature or by using the raise hand feature if they wish to provide verbal comment. When participating in tonight's meeting, one comment may be submitted per person regarding only the special meeting item on the agenda. Comments should be no more than 500 words or 3 minutes. If you submit multiple comments for a single item, the last comment will be read into the record and the remaining comments will be added to the meeting record. The public comment period closes at the conclusion of the comments being read into the record. So with that, I believe we have we can have the public, or we can have the presentation from staff, and then I'll open the public comment period after questions from the council.
Okay, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, this is Mark Roberts, your city manager, and I'm going to introduce Paul Spence, who is going to introduce our team tonight. We have a combination of staff and consultants who will be presenting an update to you and checking in with the next step of our process, as you'll remember, and we will go through in more detail. We had a initial approval for housing on the site that we are talking about this evening. We'll go back and do a bit of history on sort of how we got here, where this step fits into the overall process, and the remaining steps, because this is certainly not the last step in the process of approval moving forward. And with that, I'd like to introduce our Community Development Director, Paul Spence, who's going to start us off this evening.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, Mayor Marchand, members of the City Council. As Mark said, we appreciate the opportunity to meet with you this evening regarding the Eden Housing Project. And as Mark said, before I get started, I'd like to introduce both the city and the Eden teams. And so, Steve, if you could just, sorry, take that off for a second before we get started. There we go. So for the city team, we have Steve Stewart, our planning manager, and he's joined here this evening by Ben Murray, our senior planner. We also have Eric Uranga, our assistant community development director and manager for housing and human services, and Fran Reisner, who's our project management lead for this project. We'll also be joined this evening by Linda Manalini, who's the president of Eden Housing, as well as Matt Graves, who is the project manager for Eden Housing. And so you may hear from all of us at various points during the evening. For the presentation itself, Steve Stewart and I and Linda and Matt will be sharing in the presentation. And so, Steve, if you want to go ahead and put that up now. Great, thank you. So, as Mark said, we're excited to be at this point. As you may recall, when the council approved the downtown plan in 2018, you asked us to come back to you on the site plan for the housing when we got to that point. Well, several years later, we've now finally reached that point, and we are working with an experienced housing developer in Eden Housing. We've actually already gone out and gotten some funding for the project, and we are at the point where we're ready to hear from the council. We're interested to hear from the public tonight and to receive your direction, City Council, on how to move forward with this project. So With that, Steve Stewart is going to give us a little bit of background on where we've come from, just as a reminder, since we've been doing this for a while.
Good
Steve?
evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks, Paul. So just kind of going back to what will be about 4 years in January, back to 2017, when you recall the comprehensive community engagement the city went through that started with the appointment of a 19-member steering committee to develop an outreach plan. And over the course of about 3.5 months, through April through July, the committee held 9 meetings and heard from a number of experts, including economists, urban designers, hotel designers, and agreed upon key learnings from different aspects of the plan, and then set off in September and early November with a real comprehensive and intense community engagement program. And you'll recall that the city went through great lengths to publicize the process and get the word out and receive feedback, including a large presence on social media, active displays at our libraries and in the downtown, flyers and posters at local businesses, and then unpaid stories in our local media, and also paid print advertising in those media as well over the course of that time, and also actually had a couple of segments on NBC News. And so there's the 6 separate channels we had are listed on the screen, and community participation was very strong across all those events, and also through the online engagement tools. And you'll recall at the community workshops and the neighborhood district meetings that we held at various locations throughout town, that 75 out of 76 of the small groups showed some kind of housing on the site. And most participants said they would accept housing, but would like it to be below or within the 150 to 200 unit range, with most folks preferring a range between 110 to 170 units on the site. And again, the most common location for that housing was the northwest corner of the larger Livermore Village site. And so, as Paul mentioned, and Mark as well, the city council considered the results of the extensive community engagement and the technical studies, and chose to move forward with a plan for the hotel next to the Bankhead Theater. And here's that concept shown, called the East Side Hotel concept. And you recall at this time that the housing was shown on the northwest corner of the larger site. It was a single 4-story building with 130 units wrapped around a 3-story parking structure. And while the council did choose the hotel location at that point, they also gave direction on some of the other uses, and regarding the housing, directed staff to return with some options and continue to refine that. And so that led to the approved downtown plan that's shown on the screen now. And again, you did direct us to come back with some final designs for the housing, and we're at that point now. And before we turn it over to Eden Housing, Paul's going to talk a little bit about the disposition, development, and loan agreement with Eden Housing. So back to Paul Spence, your director.
So typically when the city works with an affordable housing developer, the city provides the land, some pre-development financing, and then enters into an agreement with the partner. And that's what we've done in this instance as well. The city owns the downtown site, and we have entered into a disposition, development, and loan agreement with Eden Housing. This DDLA lays out the ground rules and directs Eden to follow the downtown specific plan and to incorporate Veterans Park and an appropriate pedestrian passageway through the park. The agreement also provides them with site control, which is very important for them, and $500,000 in pre-development financing to move forward with the project. They've used that funding to hire a team of architects and engineers to begin work on the project. And the site control has been important because it's allowed them to go out and seek additional outside funding sources. And so we do have here with us this evening, Linda Mandolini, the president of Eden Housing. And Linda, if you'll raise your hand, Marie can bring you in and invite you as a speaker.
I just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Unfortunately, I don't know where my photograph has gone. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. You know, we're really excited to be here, and we have a really unique opportunity to dent a really big problem in our county and in the community of Livermore. And so I just want to start there with the need. As many of you know, the need for affordable housing is urgent, and it's particularly urgent in this community and in Alameda County. Our waiting list at Eden alone is 11,000 households for affordable housing in Alameda County. And then, as you can see by the statistics on the slide, the Livermore Housing Authority has 13,000 households on its waiting list. And its recent leasing on projects in the community have been overwhelmingly oversubscribed. Eden has had a similar experience with oversubscriptions. The photograph you see there is all of the applications that are waiting for housing in a senior housing project that we recently leased in Fremont. We are just seeing a huge need. And with the advent of COVID, we're seeing even greater need. Next slide. This is just a really great time for this particular development. In the 2 years that we've been working on this, we've been able to really line up a development that has a terrific opportunity to get funded and get done. The first and most important piece of funding that we have secured is the Measure A1 award from Alameda County. That's $14.4 million. That is on a hard deadline. We have to really get this project financed and in the ground by 2022. Site control is a threshold requirement. So the fact that we have this site that we've worked on all of this preliminary planning and can move this forward next year is incredibly important to holding on to that $14.4 million. The funding from the county, it really is time limited. And if Livermore doesn't spend it, there are many other projects in the county that want to spend it. So people are lining up on a waiting list, trying to seize this cash from us. And we don't want that to happen. We have really a great opportunity with this site and with the size of this project, because it's a large family project structured with 130 homes. We can use a really interesting and unique financing structure with the low-income housing tax credit. This project is super competitive for the current state funding rounds and for the way the treasurer is lining up the allocation of tax credits. Livermore is uniquely positioned as a high opportunity area to score very highly on the state's tax credit allocation. And then we know the treasurer is working on changing the way they're scoring the credits. And so we really want to get in now while we can. And so between A1 and the credits, it's really a huge opportunity, and the stars are really aligning in a great way. And last but certainly not least, this is really an asset for the city in that there are two contributions the city is making to this project. It's the contribution of the land and the $500,000. All of the other financing is coming from the tax credit structure and from Measure A1. Many cities we work with don't have a project that has this kind of tremendous financial opportunity, and it's really one we don't want to miss. Next slide. I just want to talk a little bit about who we're going to be serving. This project is primarily targeted for Livermore's workforce. We've been talking with the staff about creating a priority point scoring for local employees. The income limits on the project are 20 to 60% of area median income. And as you can see on the slide, a family that's roughly a family of four that makes between $26,100 on the low end and $78,300 on the high end. The rents run from $678 to $2,036, and that's for a 3-bedroom rent for a family of four. So it's a really great opportunity. And because we are in Veterans Park, we do have a few units set aside for veterans, and we're working with the Housing Authority on setting aside those units and making sure we have the right amount of subsidy to help those vets live successfully. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it now over to Matt Graves, who's going to walk through the site planning work for the site. But I just want to reiterate how enormous an opportunity this is for Livermore to move quickly to dent a problem that we're all trying to solve.
All right, thank you. So picking up where Linda left off with financing, as she mentioned, our financing incentivizes large family units and then income bands. So taking into account our financing, we also want to make sure that we were being responsive to community feedback. And we understood that feedback in those initial meetings as keeping with the approved downtown plan as much as possible, including a public park, and then honoring the site for Livermore's workforce housing, like Linda had mentioned. So with our financing considerations, along with our community feedback, we looked at this drawing that everyone's seeing now, the approved site. And as you will see, it has 4 buildings. And these buildings were sized based on studios and 1-bedrooms for the local workforce. And then also the other defining characteristic is a large park in the middle. So we approached this design just trying to figure out how do we back into these building sizes. So if you were to take off the footprints of those buildings, they're roughly about 8,000 square feet each footprints. And if you're trying to get 130 units into this project, that gets you about 32 to 33 units in each of those buildings. And if you use 900 square feet on average for a unit, to fit into that footprint, that gets you at about 4 floors for each of those buildings. And that would just be apartments. That wouldn't account for corridors or elevator shafts, stairs, laundry facility, offices, all the things that you would want in an apartment building wouldn't be able to fit into those footprints. So in order to make everything fit in, we would have to reduce our unit sizes below the tax credit standards for unit sizes. And so it would actually be unfinanceable. Plus, we really feel that larger family-sized units, they would adequately represent what local workforce households would want. Yeah, people in the workforce have families, and so would therefore want probably larger units than just studios and 1-bedrooms. And plus, it's better to have more options for the workforce since local households are of different sizes. Also, looking at this site, this drawing, we realized that the parking garage, if it were to be submerged, would have been inefficiently laid out in order to align with the buildings. There are structural and layout considerations when you plan a garage, and you're really trying to be as efficient as possible since parking can be very expensive to build. So that was also an issue that we noticed right off the bat. Additionally, what you're not seeing in this drawing is there is a bus turnout that has been added along Railroad Avenue, and this bus turnout will accommodate dropping off school children for the Science and Society Center, right where the cursor was. Coincidentally, it's right where the northeast building is shown. Also, what you're not seeing in this drawing, there are additional utility easements and setbacks that have been imposed after this drawing was published. And that was just to get utilities to the site and in consideration with other sites. So it became clear pretty quick that while this drawing was very effective at conveying the concept for the plan, it would be very difficult and also impossible to build according to this plan. So with these considerations, we are proposing the following slide as our plan. So this is the Eden proposal. You will notice that there are 2 buildings instead of 4. This accommodates all unit sizes that we need for our financing. These units will range from 1 to 3 bedrooms with units that Linda mentioned, 20% to 60% AMIs, and then still accommodating the local Livermore workforce. Now we're interpreting that based on community feedback as healthcare staff, public safety personnel, school district staff, and then downtown and hospitality employees, really trying to cater this site to people who work in Livermore, especially downtown. If we can move to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're proposing 2 buildings. If I could just talk about the buildings for a moment. You see we have a north building and a south building. The north building would have 79 units. And at its highest sections, it would be 4 stories. The south building would have 51 units. And at its highest sections, it would be 3 stories. And what you're noticing in the south building is there is a breezeway that cuts through the middle. Yeah, right there, right through the middle of the building. And also, I just want to mention that what you're seeing is the ground floor. So this breezeway is only along the ground floor. Floor 2s and 3 for the south building would have units running over that breezeway. So it's one contiguous building with a ground floor breezeway going through. And that accommodates increased foot traffic, pedestrian flow from the park to the L Street garage, which is directly south of us. And then of course down to First Street. These 2 buildings will have resident meeting spaces, as well as on-site laundry facilities, 2 management offices. There will be units set aside for managers and maintenance staff. All units will open into the interior corridors, as you can notice there. So no units will have front doors out to the street. Everything will enter and exit interiorly. And that allows us to really design the building to be like 4-sided with architectural statements that would read with the rest of the neighborhood. We know that this site will be viewed from all 4 sides. And so we're accommodating that. It's a little early to discuss the architecture that has been decided. However, we are reading neighboring projects. We want to read well with the neighborhood, really fit in. We also want the designs to be to really have a Livermore feel to it. And so we base our consideration on the rest of the neighborhood. One last item for the buildings is you'll notice on the west portion of the south building, there is a private playground for residents. This is mandated by our financing. Since we will be building family housing, our financing program wants us to have a play area for children. So that will be an Eden playground. And then I want to draw attention to the east side of the project, right where the cursor is. This will be a public playground. So we will have 2 playgrounds on this site. This playground will be incorporated into the park down the center, which leads me to the park at large. So I want to emphasize that the park you are looking at, this is a conceptual design. This is still open for a lot of decision making. And we're just trying to represent what it could look like. So the park is 24,000 square feet. It has a width of 68 feet. And that 24,000 square feet is not inclusive of the north building's courtyard that you see kind of juts into the building right where the cursor is. That courtyard is technically on Eden property and would be accessible to Eden residents, but would still be visually open along the public park. We really want to make sure that this space feels open and airy. And so buildings will taper and set back slightly so that you have a wide view. And then I also want to draw attention to the park lines up with the market rate park across the street, just off the screen here. Yeah, right there. So if you were to stand in Blacksmith Square, the southwest corner of Blacksmith Square, you could see through Stockman's, through our park, and then into the market rate courtyard, one clear line of sight, which is about 650 feet of sight, which will look great. Our park space is at grade, and so it is level with the park space on both sides, so it reads as one continuous park space. Again, the playground is in the southeast corner, and that's publicly available. And while this is conceptual, and there's still a lot of decision-making to be had, Eden likes to program a lot of art into our public park spaces when we build. For instance, we just finished a project in El Cerrito not too long ago, where we incorporated a lot of historical visuals and narrative signage throughout the public space that gave a nod to the local history of the Japanese American population in the flower industry that they fostered. We would want to propose something similar here, given Livermore's rich history, the veteran theming already in place. So a lot of opportunity there. We want this space to feel uniquely Livermore, since there is so much that we could draw upon and a lot of art that we could activate. So that's one suggestion, but again, this is conceptual. Conceptually, we would consider shade structures. It does get warm in Livermore, of course. And then I want to draw attention to the eastern portion of the park. So what you're seeing is that shaded area would be hardscape. So these would be pavers or kind of large tiles or something like that. And the reason for that is that portion of the park sits directly on top of our parking structure. So we have a hardscape section in the east, and then on the west portion of the park, you have the turf section. So this would have lawn, larger trees, larger landscaping. I want to emphasize that the whole portion, the whole park together will still read as a park. Even though the east portion is hardscape, there still is landscaping that we can do. It will just be in planters that will be above grade instead of going below grade. And then it's all the same level. So one continuous park. I mentioned the parking structure underneath our park. We were successful in completely submerging parking, and the entrance and exit is where the cursor is right now. So residents would enter the parking garage off of L Street. They would come underneath the south building, and then the parking structure is designed kind of in a U shape. So there are spaces and aisles all the way underneath the south building. You'd come up underneath the park where the hardscape is, and then along the north building. Both buildings would have entrances interiorly down into the parking garage. So residents would be able to exit their units, take an elevator right down to the parking garage, and then drive out. We understand that parking requires a lot of thought, especially when you're in downtown areas. And so we commissioned a traffic study with Fair and Pierce to analyze parking demand and need. So they analyzed our unit mix and the vehicular demand and usage of that mix. And the study suggested that if spaces were assigned to units, given the demand of those units, the resident demand for parking would be satisfied at a 1-to-1 ratio. And this seems pretty appropriate for other projects that we've built. We know that our residents tend to have lower rates of car ownership and they utilize mass transit very well. So we feel comfortable with proposing 132 units. We've also coordinated some minor overflow if it was needed with the L Street garage just south of us, which was originally sized into the demand of that garage. And if we could go on to the next slide, please. All right, so this is kind of going back to the 4-building drawing. When we were analyzing the site for different plans, we did give some analysis to other configurations. We initially started calling this the U configuration, although it looks a little different from the U now. One thing we liked about this configuration is it gave a lot of open space next to the Black Box Theater. It also provided larger space for the playground in the southwest corner. And it still maintained that park in the middle of the lot. However, we didn't like that that park was capped off. So Veterans Park would have been cut off from L Street, and it appears to be private space instead of public space, and it could be interpreted as confining or restrictive. There's no open line of sight to the lot, and we really wanted to maintain that. Also, our hybrid financing that Linda discussed, it considers the project as 2 phases. So one building would be 9%, one building would be 4%, and that's difficult to achieve when you have one building. It doesn't really jive well with that hybrid structure of financing. And then also a larger building, contextually may not fit well with the neighborhood if we're trying to read well with the rest of the surrounding projects. And then also it just didn't follow the approved downtown plan as well as what we're proposing. If you think back at those 4 buildings that park ran through the lot. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. This was another configuration that we analyzed. Again, we like that it has open space next to the Black Box Theater. We like that it allowed pedestrian traffic to L Street if you were to walk through the park. It also gives a little line of sight through the park to L Street. However, the way it's arranged, it still appears to be more private than we would want. And then Also, it encourages pedestrian traffic to get pretty close to our driveway, and that's the optimal place for our driveway. So there were some safety considerations. Also, with a small kind of entrance on the west, it might look like a canyon. We wanted to avoid that look. We wanted something to be as open an area as possible. And then also, again, this didn't really follow the approved downtown plan as well as what we're proposing if you go back to that drawing. So if you wouldn't mind going back 2 slides to what we are proposing, just really quick. I just want to reiterate that we feel really good about our proposal. When you look at our financing requirements, the community feedback that we got, we really feel like this is an appropriate unit mix and size for the local workforce. And we're really excited about activating the park space in a much more open and interactive way, and looking forward to making it uniquely Livermore. And with that, if we can go back to forward 2 slides, I will hand it over to Linda.
Let me unmute myself. I just want to go back to reiterate how important the project financing is for this development. As I noted earlier, you have committed to Livermore to this project in particular at this site, $14.4 million from Measure A1 East County Regional Funds. And you have the 9% and 4% credits, which are 2 different kinds of tax credit that we would be seeking from the state of California, are I'm doing this by eyeball, $49 million in financing for the project. The Section 8 voucher that we could leverage from the Livermore Housing Authority is another $8.9 million, and then the city's pre-development loan, and that doesn't count the land. So at stake here is $72.8 million that we would have to go out and find a different way if this project doesn't move forward. So we really think the opportunity is tremendous for this project, and at this size, this project really works in a unique way. Next slide. And I just want to talk a little bit about the project schedule. It is really important that we move soon. The way that our funding works is that readiness is king. So you have to be through with all of your entitlement work before you can apply for any tax credits. And we also have a clock ticking with Measure A1. So we have this really delicate dance that we have to do to give this project the best possible opportunities to apply for tax credits. As the council knows, the tax credit program in the state of California is extremely competitive, and this community is in the most competitive portion of the tax credits geography. Alameda County is in a pool with other communities in the Bay Area. So you have to give the project as many opportunities as it can to apply. And that would mean trying to apply for both rounds next year. Hopefully we'll get it in the first go round, but sometimes it takes 2 tries just because of the volume of applications that they get. They're usually oversubscribed 6 to 1. On the tax credits, so we really want to be ready, and ready means no further entitlement or jurisdictional approval. So we have to be through the council by probably mid-March of next year. If we get that, we can start construction in late 21 or early 22, and then we'll have projects available to move in by 23, which seems like a long time from now, honestly, because we've been working on this since 2018 and even a little bit before. So we would really encourage us to move forward. This is a really, really unbelievably great opportunity for Livermore to move this project forward and make a dent in your housing needs, which we know are just going up because we've seen some of the numbers coming out for our city partners in recent rounds. So we're happy to take any questions on this if you have them.
And so, Mr. Mayor, that does conclude our presentations. Steve, if you could perhaps go back to the blow up slide of the site plan there. And Mr. Mayor, we'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you very much. Questions from the council at this point? One of the questions that I have for Ms. Mandolini is, you've been doing this for quite a while, obviously, and what is your experience? You said that the parking is 1-to-1, and that typically you don't have people with multiple vehicles on these. So for a 3-bedroom, 2 or 3 bedroom unit like these, what is the typical parking needed for a unit like that? What is your average need for parking in units like this?
So we actually did a parking study to make sure that one-to-one could work here, and we actually believe that it can. You know, you have a good local transportation here, and since we're targeting the Livermore workforce as the top priority, we think that this works, and we are working with the city to get some overflow parking in the L Street garage. So I think one-to-one works. I think it works particularly because we're going to assign spaces, and you know, our residents don't really want to own multiple cars if they don't have to. And so because it's just expensive to own cars in California. So we think that this can work. And so, you know, we actually think it's the wave of the future for all of the projects that we're working on, is to reduce parking. And just to give you some sense, every parking space we build costs an additional $75,000 a parking space. We would much rather take that money and put it into the housing than put it into parking garage.
Wow. Okay, any other questions for staff at this point, from the council? I don't see any questions. Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing, public comment period. So with that, I will hand this over to the city clerk's office for the public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. City Clerk's Office, please read the comments received over Zoom Q&A.
This comment's from Thomas Jefferson. Item 2.01, congratulations to Bob Warner on his Livermore mayor election victory. During his mayoral campaign, he expressed support for moving the housing currently planned for the area between Veterans Way and Railroad Avenue to another location, and thereby freeing up space for an expanded park area. This change would be a win-win for Livermore. I urge Mayor-elect Warner and the rest of the City Council to pursue this win-win solution. Thomas Jefferson, Livermore. And then, excuse me, just one second. Okay. This comment is from Jan. And it says, will we be able to move the Eden housing to the north side of Railroad Avenue? This would allow much more room for a larger park, which would connect to Stockman's Park. It would also add a lot of open space, not only for the city's residents who are downtown, but would add needed open space for the high density housing going in now at the Growth Brothers property and for Eden housing, which would be across Railroad Avenue. The next comment is from Rivka Several. Item 2.01, thank you for this presentation and for the opportunity for public comments. I encourage the careful consideration of the location and concerns about the canyon effect, hoping to continue with the win-win attitude that Mayor-elect Warner forwarded earlier. From Lori Souza, with a deadline of January 2022 and the commitment of county and city funds, this is an obvious project to approve to move forward to completion. The need is so great and the project will only address a small part of that demand, but we need to start somewhere. Eden Housing has been a proven partner for Livermore and should be given our vote of confidence to commence ASAP. Okay. The next comment is from Ellen Turner. I haven't heard anything about an alternative location for the low-income housing. There's been considerable interest among residents, also some from Bob Warner, to consider a site between L and K across Railroad to the north. There would be room for more housing units, plus obviating the canyon effect on L Street. At some point, there was a proposal to study this area of an alternative site. That study should take place. The next comment is from Splen Splendorio. I'm Splen Splendorio, Chairman of Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group's Housing, Infrastructure, and Transportation Committee. ITV's members are major employers in the Tri-Valley. Our members have consistently emphasized that affordable and workforce housing are sorely lacking in the Tri-Valley and substantially challenges our members' efforts to grow their businesses. ITV endorses and supports Eden Housing's project for 130 homes and asks that this project be approved with all due speed so as to not endanger the funding secured for the project. Delaying this project or pushing it to another location will mean that 130 families at or near our social safety net will be without affordable housing. There's no question that we have a significant need for housing in our region. Livermore Housing Authority and Interfaith Housing have very large waiting lists. There are 120 homeless children in Livermore schools. Local workers struggle to live in Livermore due to the shortage of housing. One point is crucial: if moving the site means losing 130 workforce homes for at least 5 years with uncertain financing, when those homes are desperately needed for local employees now, take the sure thing. And I have, I have multiple comments from different people, so I want to make sure I read the most current comment. And so this comment is from Michael Ferrucci. This is his most recent comment. What would be the negative impact of an additional study of the Eden Housing project and postponing final approval until citizens have a clear understanding of both the pros and cons to each potential location and variation? I personally want to see additional open space and park in the development area. This is a first-time opportunity of many Livermore citizens to examine the project details and potential optional locations that we deserve to consider. Please give a reason that we should not wait for further community review. I'm looking forward to a win-win. This will be something that will bring the community together. I will certainly feel like a winner if we do not create a canyon effect on L Street, and would feel more of a winner if we gain more open space and park area. Please listen to the people who put you there.
If I could just make a comment here, if I could break in just for a moment. So apparently we have people that are submitting written comments and also raising their hands to provide verbal comments. So we're going to do one or the other. We're not going to, people aren't going to comment twice. So if someone has their comments read because they submitted written comments and it's read by the city clerk, then those are your comments. If you wish to state your own comments, you can do that as well. But if you've had your comments read, please don't raise your hand because you've already had your comments made. So just to make that clear. Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Go ahead with the comments that we have.
The next comment is from Michelle Snedecor. Livermore Downtown Inc. continues its endorsement to moving forward with the Eden Housing workforce housing development in the current designated and controlled location. We have a great need for affordable housing. We have funds ready to invest, and we have an experienced and highly effective developer ready. Let's move this forward and not lose this exceptional opportunity for those hardworking healthcare, education, first responders, and hospitality professionals that provide us with excellent service, ensuring Livermore's quality of life. Okay. Sorry, there's multiple from one person. Okay. Okay, the next comment is from Jackie Cotta, and as per our procedure, the last comment will be read. You've got to be kidding me. The next comment is from Maureen Ham. Any option to add a driveway? The next, the next comment is from Ellen Burnham. I'm raising the issue of a transcontinental railroad memorial somewhere between Livermore Avenue and L Street. The railroad was instrumental to the growth of Livermore and getting cattle to the market. If you don't believe me, just review some of Mayor Marchand's speeches. Jeff Caskey and I suggested that for Stockman's Park, but it slipped through the cracks. Alan Frank and I have looked at minor retrofits to Stockman's Park, and the Stockmen are supported in general. Everyone we've talked to supports some sort of memorial there, but there are concerns by a few about some specific proposals. Some suggest that it be part of Veterans Park, not Stockman's Park. The current drawings are not detailed to address this issue, but from previous experience, until someone is within the city government decides it really needs to be someplace, it will again slip through the cracks. Is the design of Veterans Park done by Eden Housing or the City of Livermore? Alan Frank and I would certainly like to interact with whomever is, and there isn't a second part to that. The next comment is from Don Arnold. Item 1. I open with a thank you to the city for the downtown decorations. They are exciting, much needed, and uplifting. Bravo. To address the workforce housing item, I would like to strongly encourage to council to schedule the review of the alternate plan for the new housing units on the north side of Railroad Avenue and to carry out a thorough assessment of the alternate plan. Location of the housing north of Railroad will create a much more logical and functional layout of housing, business, and open space that will be far more attractive. It will offer a path to a larger number of units. You could use the huge amount of money being spent on insufficient underground parking to build the extra units. Relocation across Railroad will avoid creation of an awkward gap in the businesses on the south side of Railroad Avenue. I am confident that our city leaders can find a way to make this a great success story for Livermore and create a path for future growth of this wonderful, diverse, and livable city. Okay, and I apologize. I realized, well, Mr. Arnold has more to his comment, excuse me. Parking was the #1 issue to the people of Livermore who participated in the outreach effort. How do you justify providing only 1 parking space per unit? There will likely be 2-car couples living there and they will have guests from time to time. This plan is going to severely impact parking in our already parking impacted downtown. Please consider alternatives to this plan, including moving the units to another location, like the location north of Railroad. This comment's from Richard Ryan. I understand there's an alternative plan being discussed that would have substantially more housing north of Railroad Avenue. I urge you not to preclude this option with anything you do tonight. From Brittany Kick. This project is well planned and more importantly funded. Families and small businesses need housing now. From Mark Palajak, City Council, staff, Eden Housing, and others involved. My name is Mark Palajak, and I'm working with a small group of Livermore residents. Our purpose is to see if there's a viable alternative location for some of the 130 affordable workforce housing. You may recognize me as a commissioner of the Livermore Housing Authority and a committee member on 2 of the Equity and Inclusion subcommittees. I would like to first state that an alternative solution cannot jeopardize the county A1 funding or other elements necessary to implement these 130 affordable units. We would like the opportunity to interact with Eden Housing to understand their plan and see if we can formulate an acceptable, hopefully preferable alternative location. We are working with organizations who we believe are interested in adding to the number of units, but cannot disclose any information about them at this time. We recognize that the timeline is very short and any ideas we have need to mature very quickly. Okay, excuse me. This comment is from Jeff. Just prior to the November election, in response to questions asked by the Independent to determine who to endorse for mayor, Bob Warner stated, "The objective is to figure out the best feasible location by carefully evaluating all the factors. I imagine there will need to be plenty of opportunity for public input and reasoned discussion on the potential benefits. Hopefully, the best course of action will become apparent as members of the community collaborate." This offer of public input came very recently, well after the initial pre-2020 outreach program from prior to 2020. Excuse me. In today's meeting, there appears to be no input from staff, no dialogue from Eden Housing, and no guidance from council on which the public could usefully collaborate related to other locations. City's stated goal is that staff will send materials to Planning Commission in January. The opportunity for significant community collaboration passes at the end of the meeting. How will this be reconciled with Mr. Warner's statement? This comment's from Nipun, N-I-P-U-N. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Due to the budgetary timeline constraints and the desperate need for more housing in this area, I think it's very important this project goes forward. This can help local Livermore families that need it the most. from Valerie Nebo, and last name's Nebo. This project has been presented well in advance. Public comment has been sought throughout this process, and the plans have been available to the community. Our city council has acted in good faith to ensure housing for Livermore families while also being good stewards to the city's funds. With a deadline approaching, we need to move forward. Aesthetics is not a compelling reason to pass on funding sources that will meet housing needs for families. And okay. And excuse me, there was Mr. Burnham's comment was cut off mid-sentence. And the final sentence is, Alan Frank and I would certainly like to interact with whomever is designing Veterans Park, be it Matt Graves or someone else. And that concludes the comments on Zoom Q&A.
City Clerk's office, please announce and unmute people submitting public comment verbally.
Our first comment is from Evan Browning.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the city staff. I would like to thank particularly Eden Housing for all of the work they've done on this project. It was quite a number of constraints that they had to deal with to come up with a project that looks beautiful, will help our local families, will help residents, and will help people working in our city. As this project moves forward, I strongly encourage the city council and the mayor to approve the project. There is no reason that I can see to gamble $72 million on an opportunity for moving the housing and creating a larger park that simply doesn't fit with the general character of that area regardless. This project has been vetted over multiple years. The changes currently to this plan versus the ones that have been proposed over and over are small in the aesthetics and small in the actual footprint. Any major changes that we're looking at put this entire project at risk of major delays, still building the housing on that site, as I do not see a feasible alternative that would allow the housing to actually be moved to another site. And it risks literally tens of millions of dollars into the project, tens of millions of dollars that the city is being given to build this. We have all the good reasons to build this, and it is perfectly in line with, I believe, what the council has said before, which is they're always open to hear good plans and open to hear good options. And this option happens to be one that I believe is both the best option and absolutely fits with all of the goals and priorities that the people have voted on, the people have spoken for, and the people demand. Please improve this project and please move forward in a timely manner so that we don't risk these funds. Thank you.
The next comment is from Rich Buckley.
Excuse me, Mr. Spence, could we unshare the screen so that we could see the timer? Thank you.
Hi, this is Rich Buckley, 620 Hayes Avenue in Livermore. Thank you, Mary Marchand, for this opportunity to speak. And thank you, Eden Housing, for working with the community in a very sensitive manner that you have. We really need to look at the alternative plan. We were given the hope that this would be looked at before any decision was made. Thank you very much.
The next comment is from Cal Wood.
Hi, I'm Cal Wood, 420 Lincoln Avenue. I have a couple of questions. Certainly the alternative plan of extra housing with a much larger park is very attractive, but at this point there's been a lot of work that's gone into it. What would happen to the 14.4 million if another alternative were looked at? And who owns the property north? The city already owns the plan or owns the land where the plan was given to us tonight, do we have to acquire the land north? And what happens to the 14.4 million? I would certainly like to see the larger park, but I would hate to see the 14.4 million lost. So there are some questions that need to be answered. How locked in are we on this? And will the extra housing north be in addition to this if we can't stop this project here, at least temporarily? Thank you.
The next comment is from Marianne Brent.
I think, Marianne, you're still on mute.
Hello, City Council, Mr. Mayor and staff. I believe that we need many more than 130 units than the present plan offers, but the Lucky site is not an appropriate space for the housing. It's much too dense. I mean, the plan that was presented tonight is much too dense and doesn't look anything like the plan that we were used to seeing. Furthermore, I think that the reason that in the outreach, 75 out of 76 respondents called for housing on the site is that it wasn't known if the housing could be moved without penalty. Can the project go forward across Railroad Avenue? I think an appropriate space for an appropriate use of the space on the site is a park. We need a prominent park downtown because parks have economic value. They're attractive and they bring local and visiting customers to our First Street businesses. A downtown park could be used as a marketing tool. Furthermore, a park in downtown Livermore makes it unique in the region for a city its size. Besides their obvious human health benefits, parks would brand Livermore as an active environmental champion. A park in our downtown will enhance Livermore's identity as a wine center. Help our workforce by building many more sites, many more units across Railroad Avenue, and expand Stockman's Park to help Livermore's economy, Mr. Werner. Thank you.
Our next comment is from Don Argula.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. This is Dawn Argula, CEO of the Livermore Valley Chamber of Commerce. And tonight I am going on record again, reaffirming our support, first of all, for Eden Housing that we expressed and we went on record pre-COVID-19. They have an excellent reputation and they have built some really very beautiful and accommodating projects throughout the Tri-Valley region and Alameda County and in the Bay Area region. And then also I want to express again the Chamber's support for the housing project, the 130 units that are designated for that corner after we went through many years of painful planning and examination and evaluation of the 8-acre parcel, which I am reminded the city purchased with $14.5 million of affordable housing trust fund dollars, affordable housing that still remains to be delivered. And listening to this presentation tonight, how amazing that we are able to leverage $14.5 million into almost $73 million to deliver this project, to house our workers locally, and to bring added vitality to our downtown merchants area. We are not opposed to more housing on the north side of Railroad Avenue, and perhaps that could be a future project to complement what we will be building here on the corner of Railroad and L Street. So with that, we intend to continue to support you and support this project And we look forward to making progress in the coming weeks and months and to ultimately see a groundbreaking in 2022, sorry. And congratulations to Mayor Warner and to all of you for your due diligence, for your commitment, and for all of your hard work, and to get the downtown plan this far. And we look forward to continuing to support you in executing the rest of the vision for the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got a request to, during public comment, normally what I do is I read the people that are on deck. So I'll read like 3 people ahead. So what I'm going to do is just people have a kind of a heads up. So the next speaker is going to be Lanning Thompson, followed by Mike Frederick, followed by Lisa Tromovich. Okay.
Hello?
Yes, Lanning Thompson.
I'm Lanning Thompson, the current president of Interfaith Housing, but I'm speaking here as an advocate for affordable housing in general. I strongly urge the Planning Commission and the City Council to approve Eden Housing's proposals for building the 130 apartments in the northwest corner of the downtown site as presented tonight. Even before the pandemic affected our economy, hardworking low and middle income families were struggling to rent apartments that they could afford in Livermore. New affordable apartment developments such as Chestnut Square have been swamped with applications. Mid-Penn received over 3,000 applications for its 42 family apartments last summer. And Interfaith Housing currently has a total of 800 applications for its 207 senior apartments. This housing is needed ASAP. The city and Eden Housing have been allocated $14.4 million from Alameda County's Measure A1 funds for the downtown project as it was submitted to the county in 2019. If there were a major change such as relocation, the project would lose that funding, which the city can't afford to do. Moreover, the majority of the funding for the project is expected to come from federal tax credit program, in which large corporations can fund affordable housing projects in lieu of paying taxes directly to the government. There are 2 opportunities each year to apply for tax credits, and the next one is in March. In order to be ready to apply, Eden's project must be approved by the Planning Commission in January, and the council must grant entitlement to the land in February. Tax credits aren't easy to get. Due to the pandemic economy, many corporations are making less money, so fewer are interested in participating in that program. A state board decides how to allocate the funds that are available, and new housing projects don't always make the cut the first time they apply. Amassing the funding can take a long time, so Eden needs to get started soon. Interfaith Housing and Saha, another affordable housing developer, are following a similar course and timeline in developing our 140 apartment project for seniors at the end of Pacific Avenue. We too hope to be able to apply for tax credit funding in March, so I can understand Eden's urgent need for entitlement. Besides, this plan would not create all that much of a canyon. If you end up feeling oppressed by the apartment buildings on L Street, try P Street.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Okay, so Michael Frederick, Lisa Tromovich, and Asa Strout. Mr. Frederick.
Hello, Mayor. I'm going to miss seeing you. Anyway, as Mayor-elect Warner suggested before the election, we should be considering alternatives like moving the housing to the other side of Railroad Avenue. What I just saw from Eden Housing is a much larger and much more expansive development than was suggested by Measure P. I feel a little bit like it's been a bait and switch situation. And to some extent, I feel like I'm talking to a salesman who says, hey, here's the deal, take it now, or it's going to go away. We should have the right to consider other alternatives to what's been presented tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Frederick. Lisa Tromovich, Asa Strout, Jonna Thompson.
Hi, thank you for allowing these presentations, and thank you to Eden Housing for a well thought out presentation and showing us the other designs that were considered and the reasoning that brings us to the current design. I'd also like to amplify the comments from Lori Souza, Splen Splendorio, and Evan Branning, and add a couple of points. I just want to remind us that the entire block was purchased with housing money. It is dishonorable to use that money and then boot out the housing. Extensive public discussion has occurred over the last several years, and citizens have weighed in throughout the process, and all ideas have been explored. The wonderful result of the public process is the creation of Stockman's Park on half the land, and it's now time to honor the housing need on the other half. The downtown housing will help the downtown businesses that are really hurting right now, and trying to purchase land from the private landowners on North Railroad, develop a new plan, etc., would delay the building of the housing, harm the downtown businesses, and as we've learned tonight, risk losing all of the funding if we don't meet the upcoming deadlines. The location is walking distance to the ACE train station and bus stops. And what I've found is the trend among younger workforce is to avoid car ownership. So with this location, workers will be able to live and work from Livermore from this location without putting more cars on the street. It will create a sense of neighborhood with the housing on both sides of L Street, creating a neighborhood feel with the units that are being built on the old Growth Brothers site. And I think that will be welcome to the people who live there. The addition of the Veterans Park to Stockman's Park, Shea Plaza in front of the Bankhead, and Lizzie Fountain will provide plenty of spaces for people to take their lunch, to enjoy outside, let kids run around, play Frisbee, and hold cultural events. So thank you to city staff, council, Eden Housing. I think you've done a wonderful job, and I urge council to approve the plan as presented. Thank you.
Okay, we have Asa Strout, Jonna Thompson, and Marcus Libkind.
Hi, good evening. Long time no see everyone on council, mayor, council members, staff. Really appreciate you guys holding this meeting to get our feedback in terms of the design. In terms of what I would like to say is, I really think that we should be, I love you too, Grace, that we should move forward with this plan. I'm not going to echo all the points said by the other members who have commenters who have supported this plan, but I would just like to add that, we are still in a housing crisis, more so now than we were prior to COVID-19, to the point that if we continue to sit on our heels when it comes to building housing for our community, that it's the inequality within our city is only going to get worse. So to meet the goals of being a diverse and inclusive community, we also need to look at those who are on different socioeconomic ladders within our society and really support them, as well as all the wonderful cultures within Livermore. I would just like to end there, but I'm going to add something really quickly that, there's been a lot of talk about creativity and win-wins. I think the creativity and win-win that we should be looking for is to trying to get this done sooner than 2023, because I know people are in need now. I would love to see, that's the kind of creativity that I would love to see. So yeah, thank you for your time. I'm really looking forward to seeing this complete. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Jonna Thompson, Marcus Libkind, and David Rounds.
Good evening, Mayor Marchand and council members. I sincerely hope that the actions you're taking this evening will not preclude the opportunity to relocate the workforce housing to an alternative site, as Mayor-elect Warner proposed before the election to numerous accolades. There's tremendous support for Mr. Warner's proposal for relocating the housing and providing a larger park for all of Livermore to enjoy. I strongly urge you to work toward relocating the housing as expeditiously as possible, so as to take advantage of the financing opportunities detailed this evening. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Marcus Libkind, David Rounds, Gene King.
Thank you for letting me speak this evening. I'm confident that anyone viewing the issue with an open mind will come to the decision that the Eden housing does not need to be and should not be in the center of the current downtown development. This land is too valuable for housing from the perspective of alternative uses that will benefit the entire citizenry of Livermore. In the presentation, it was said that 75 out of 76 focus groups wanted some form of housing in the area. But one should keep in mind that they were not given the option of housing across Railroad Avenue. I wonder what the result would have been if there had been that alternative. Building a larger park downtown, and I emphasize additional retail space, will bring more residents to the area and boost downtown businesses. The lack of additional retail in the downtown development is a huge negative. I can't understate this shortcoming. It will also be a draw for people from out of town to visit. Wasn't that a big reason for the once planned 2,000-seat theater on the site? 80% of the visitors to the theater were to come from out of town. On the flip side, moving the housing a very short distance will more than meet the desire to provide housing. It can double the number of units. During the run-up to the November election, Bob Werner said there is still the opportunity to relocate the Eden housing. I call on him and the rest of the city council to follow through and analyze an alternative to the existing plan. Moving the housing is a win-win situation. We get more housing, more retail, and a bigger park. We attract more we attract more residents to visit downtown, and we attract more visitors from out of town. Why would you choose not to analyze such an alternative? The only responsible thing to do is a thorough analysis of a quality plan that includes relocation of Eden housing. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Libkin. Moving on to Gene King, James Murray, and Carol Silva.
You forgot David Rounds.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, David Rounds, then Gene King. You bumped up to the top there.
Thank you, Mayor. So first, kudos to Eden for putting together a strong financing package. With that, it seems that while running for election, Mayor-elect Werner was very willing to encourage residents about his willingness to consider what some folks are calling a win-win opportunity that would move Eden housing to a nearby location, build more housing than this original plan, while allowing for a larger central park. Now that the election is over, seems clear that the financing deadlines for Eden will preclude the possibility of a win-win. And unfortunately, I expect that Mr. Werner has known this for months. And if he did not understand this, he certainly should have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rounds. Gene King, James Murray, Carol Silva.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I always hit it through too many times, I guess. Hi, this is Gene King, and I have a couple things that I would like to add to this. I would like you to consider very seriously moving the housing over to the north of Railroad Avenue. And there are several reasons for doing this. For one thing, the Eden housing person keeps saying they want to make sure that this housing goes with Livermore's character. It doesn't go with Livermore's character. It is very similar to what was across the street at Growth Brothers. The problem is when you see something which just is on two two-dimensional plot, flat, and you see the housing is here and then there's something else, you don't get the terrible feeling that you get from the Growth Brothers, the 4 stories, the huge thing, the canyons that has made Livermore Avenue. If you put these 4-story buildings across the street, across L Street, you're going to have even more of a tunnel thing, because you don't, with the paper view, you don't get this idea of the tall buildings. So it looks like, oh, I've got as much open space as I've got buildings. No, because the buildings go up 3 and 4 stories and the open space is just sitting there surrounded and in this tunnel. So this isn't the character of Livermore, putting these huge buildings and very little open space. You're trying to put too much housing in too small a space. The Livermore's character is open space and parks and places for families to be. When Alan Burnham suggests very nicely that there should be some memorial to the railroad, Intercontinental Railroad, and he'd like to have something there, there's no room for that. There's a children's playground, and then there's a space between the 2 big buildings. There's no open space for frisbees for families to grow, or for there to be a railroad memorial. You're just putting too much stuff in a small space. Let's move some across the street. 130 units there is too much. Move it across the street where there's more room, and it won't be another tunnel across L Street. So move it over there and see what you can do. When I come and I listen to this, it's kind of like, have you ever gone up and heard one of those spiels about buying a timeshare? You got to do it right now. If you don't do it right now today, you're not going to be able to do it in the future. They do that because they know if you will stop and think about it a little bit, you'll realize it isn't a good deal. And what I think you're trying to do is to push us to make a decision tonight. We really need to look at it for longer. It's a different plan than what we've had. Growth Brothers is there. That's different. Things are different than they were before. We need time to think about it. We need time to look to see what can be done across the street on north of Railroad Avenue. Let's not rush into this. We've thought about it for this amount of time. Let's take time and let's see that we can make this be truly belonging to Livermore's character with more open space. I don't
Thank you, Ms. King. Thank you.
Next time, put up a time clock. Okay.
The time clock is up. Thank you. James Murray, Carol Silva, Daniel Ramirez.
Hi, this is Jim Murray. I'm a long-term resident of Livermore. And it seems to me that there are potentially significant advantages to moving the housing north of Railroad Avenue. Most obviously, more affordable housing and a larger park on main site. And since the housing under construction on the west side of L Street is to be 4 stories high, moving the housing would avoid some of the walled-in feeling from 4-story buildings on both sides of L Street. Considering that this is a very long-term commitment for our town, we only have this one chance to get it right. I strongly request that the city at least consider this alternative to see if the advantages of moving the housing outweigh any problems created by it. Thanks.
Okay, I've got a comment for the city clerk. I've got a couple of people. Now I can see the time clock, but I got a couple of people have chimed in that the time clock is not visible. So could we just make sure that the time clock is visible? So I can see it, but apparently the home audience can't. So if we could just make sure
yes,
that.
Mayor, I'm sorry, Mayor. I will have to change this to gallery view.
Okay. Whatever you need to do to grant the time clock, because I'll make sure that the people can see that. Okay, so we have Carol Silva, Daniel Ramirez, and Doug Mann. And if we switch to gallery view and bring up the time clock so folks can see it.
As soon as Ms. Silva starts, I'll start the time clock.
Okay, Ms. Silva.
Hi, I'm Carol Silva. I'm waiting to see if I can see a time clock, and so far I don't see it.
Okay, we're still in gallery view. So I can, because I see the time clock, but I guess nobody else does.
Sorry to jump in, but what would happen if we did it not as a gallery view, but as a projected on the
Like a shared screen?
like that? Thank you.
Let's see, City Clerk's office, can we switch to a shared screen instead?
Just one moment, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Or I suppose they could time themselves. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, Ms. Silva, I'll start timing you, and then hopefully by that time we can get the shared screen with the timer on view. So, okay, let her rip.
All right. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I thought that the City Council, as claimed by Bob Warner, would end up studying that the Eden housing could be possibly moved so that we could enlarge the park and benefit the community. Parks do help people's emotions and well-being, and it would be really nice if Eden housing could be located somewhere else where the size of the units, the number of units could be increased. I do have a couple of questions, and one of my questions is, I was wondering if the council has even reviewed possible alternative sites for the housing. And another question I have is in regards to, I think there was talk about phase 1 and phase 2 in regards to construction. And if it's going to be done in 2 phases, I kind of wonder if, because it seems like there's this funding crunch, that if nothing's done right away, the funding's going to go away. So if construction's done in 2 phases, would it be possible to do half of the Eden housing on site and the other half somewhere else? Also, this is more of a question for Eden housing, but I was wondering, how firm is the funding as presented by Eden? So those are my questions, and I appreciate your time. I would really like to see a larger park downtown than what is shown in the conceptual drawings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silva. Next we have, cancel. All right, so next we have, oh, there we go. Okay, we've got wow, that's serious. Okay, next we have, let me get back up here to Daniel Ramirez, followed by Doug Mann. Can people see the timer? All right, Mr. Ramirez.
See the timer. Thank
Yes.
you. My name is Daniel Ramirez. I am a 41-year resident of Livermore, and I want to say that the Eden Housing Project, as I saw it in the presentation today, I think it's well thought out, and it needs to be executed. We have an urgent need right now for the housing. We can't afford to lose the $14.4 million, and we'll never satisfy everybody. The fact of the matter is that if we don't act, we're not going to satisfy anybody. So I'd like to ask that the city council tonight proceed forward and approve the Eden Housing Project. It's not going to be the last time that something like this comes up. It takes years to get this through, but why don't we get it going and resolve some issues that we have now, and then we can continue to work to on the additional needs as in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ramirez. And next we have Doug Mann.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pretty much agree with the general comments that Jean King made. I think she, I don't need to repeat most of it. I do think that soon to be Mayor Warner should have the opportunity to, prove he was serious and allow us to fully explore how many of the units could be relocated elsewhere. In the earlier part of this meeting, there was Steve was mentioning that the numbers of housing units that people wanted during the workshops, and the floor seemed to be 110. Well, I remember how all that worked out. I mean, we were talking about many, many more units. And if you were to say to somebody, would you rather have 300 or 110? They're going to say 110. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't be happier with 50. When that question is never asked, then you won't get that answer. So I would like to, again, have future Mayor Warner, Mayor-elect Warner, be able to, heal this whole process and give a real serious effort toward exploring whether or not we can get some of those units off of the part of the project that we really want to reserve for as nice of a park as we can get. The one parking space, which I just heard tonight, one parking space per unit. Nobody can seriously think that will be adequate, even for a low income project like this. That's that can't, that can't be serious. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mann. Veronica Stewart, Gina Bonanno.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'd like to thank the council for your commitment to pursuing housing. This is one of the charming things about Livermore is how down to earth this community is around in the context of other communities around us. And so I really commend you for that. I also want to draw attention to the actual place we're talking about. And it is the downtown. It is literally the community's heart. And I think while we do need more housing, that spot is not the right place for it. And I was so happy when Mr. Warner suggested considering alternative locations for the housing. Right now, we are pitting housing against an extraordinary opportunity for Livermore to develop something in its heart for the residents. But we're pitting them against each other in even this discussion. And that, I think that is wrong, because we want the housing. We do, everybody wants it. But we also need to not let this wonderful opportunity to build or to create, I should say, something spectacular in that spot for the residents. the residents and the visitors. Something very special, a very special place there would be an attraction. It would attract businesses, it would attract people to move here, it would make current residents happy. I mean, it would be something they can enjoy, let me say. And I just think that is such an opportunity being lost to turn it into an apartment complex. So I would just please encourage the council and Mr. Warner to pursue an alternative. It really would be a tragic loss to the community to lose that space as its heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Gina Bonanno. I think you're still on mute.
Pardon me, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
Good evening, council and staff. I have just a very brief comment I'd like to make, and that's with all due respect to many of the previous comments. The 130 units of housing on the downtown site has already been approved by both the Planning Commission and the City Council. The process, once the land use determination has been made, is to bring the design and the site plan to the Planning Commission and then to the City Council, as staff has laid out earlier in this meeting. The public will then get another opportunity to comment on the specific site plan and design at the Planning Commission meeting, which is projected for January. So I just wanted to make that reminder to people who may have forgotten that this is already an approved plan. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bonanno. Okay, and we have, I see no more hands, but if I could ask the, Carl Wente just raised his hand, and then I see Nadia Briez brought in a comment as well. So I'd like the city clerk's office to read that after we hear from Mr. Wente.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, staff, city council. Thank you all for what you do. What is good government? Of the people, for the people, by the people. The First Amendment, right to speak up. Everybody has their point of view, and we have an amazing form of public government. Workforce and families downtown, that's a good thing. Rents capped, affordable housing, that's a good thing. Veterans units, that's a good thing. We can't and should not let perfect get in the way of good. Now we can continue to make this the best it can be. Lest we remember, there was one plan by fundamentally the same crew that was endorsing 420 units downtown, underground BART coming in a 2,000 person theater. And then we went to, the Lennar plan. And then we had this sort of interesting in between with the flyovers of concrete. But we have had the process. And for people saying that we didn't have the time to think about this, to talk about this, to analyze this, it's not true, right? There was plenty of us that sat through that whole process, that were on that steering committee. I'm one of those on the steering committee. Right, and so we talked about this all the way through. We cannot let perfect get in the way of good. The process of government has happened, right? You got to let planners plan and do their job. There's utilities, there's underground, there's probably some leftover remnants from the petrol station that was there, right? There's all this stuff that goes into it to formulating where these can go and how this can get done. And then there's also the finances. My generation cares deeply about the finances and funding and the affordable housing funds and what reneging on affordable housing funds could do to our interest rates and our bond rates and how we're perceived. Plus, we just flat need the housing. But to say that we haven't spoken about this and to come back and said, Bob Warner, Mayor-elect, congratulations. Brittany, congrats. Like that has shown a willingness to talk to anybody and everybody anytime. I've been lucky enough to be in some conversations. So we talk about how to improve and how to continuously improve. But I think you all know you have a fiduciary responsibility at this point to move forward, right? The dollars on the line, the plan, the process, we went through it. I get it. Some people are not thrilled. The architecture of this, the architectural committee, the arts committee, bringing everyone together to do the best that we can with this. Like we have it, we're going. So continue to get public input. Thank you, Mrs. Bonanno, for saying that there's still time to continue to evolve this, make it the best it can be. However, we went through this. We've talked about it. Win-win. There's even common language out there, and I'll bet you a quarter that win-win is going to show up in the independent. and that's fine. We want to make this the best it can, but this is a win-win, and we can still incrementally improve it as we go along. So thank you, Mr. Warner, for listening. Thank you, Marshawn, for your service. Thank you to the other 3 for what you do. You have a fiduciary responsibility to move forward, and I believe that you all know that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Wente. All right, let's see here. Okay, Maureen Ham had posted a question, but that was it's not really a comment. So I will allow Ms. Ham to make her public comment. Said I don't see her hand raised. Jan has already had her comment read, but let's see if we can. Okay, there's Maureen Ham. Okay, if we could move Maureen Ham up for her comments. I think you're on mute. Maureen Ham, I think you're on mute.
Mayor, I believe Maureen Ham has already had a written comment.
She had a question that she had posted. That was a very brief question, but she actually had a comment that she wished to make. And since this is one of the first times we've tried this, I'd like to give her the opportunity to speak. Okay. She was there for a moment. She looks like she's gone. If we could bring Maureen Ham back.
I do not believe that she is available at this point. I do not see her name.
Okay. We already heard from Jan. She had her comment read. If either Ms. Oh, there she is. I see she's down in the queue. Her hand isn't raised, but still there.
Hello.
Is that Maureen Ham?
Yes, it is Maureen Ham. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
I'm sorry, it kicked me out.
Okay,
but
well, you're
now
back.
I'm back. Okay, well, thank you so much. Yes, I'm very much in approving this approved downtown plan. We are obligated to put affordable housing on that site, as far as I know. We've got this A1 money. The other people in the county would love it if we foolishly did not meet the timelines and spend this money. We're going to lose it if we don't use it. It takes years to do these projects, as we know from the Chestnut Square. That took like 9 years. So we really can't screw around with this. Also, this plan will give us people and parks. And it's true that people need to have their well-being, but housing helps people have their well-being. I would also say that this idea that sort of sprung out of I don't know where about moving it across the street, you would wipe out a whole bunch of small businesses. Have you guys thought about that? And we would lose all the money that we've got all lined up to do this project. The canyon effect, I would say that if you look at the way the buildings are set, the longest part of the buildings, one part is facing railroad, the other part is facing the parking lot. So the long part of the building is not facing L Street. And so I would say that is not a correct assessment. We really need, people need housing. And I appreciate that you've given me an opportunity to speak here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ham. All right. I'm looking to see if there are any other hands raised. I see no more hands raised. If the city clerk's office could read Nadia Brea's comment.
Yes, sir. This
Thank
is
you.
Reyes. Says, hello, my apologies if I'm late with a comment, but I'm a resident, small business owner, and board member of Livermore Downtown Inc. I believe we need to go forward with this project as it's vital to the health and vitality of our downtown merchants who are struggling. This will inject much needed support for them. Eden Housing has done a great job, and I'm very impressed with the plan thus far. And that concludes.
Okay, any further comments on YouTube? Anything else on
Sorry,
YouTube?
Mayor, we are not accepting comments over YouTube this
Pardon me?
evening. We are not accepting comments over YouTube this evening.
Okay, very good then. It's a force of habit then. Okay, we've got Q&A. I see no further hands raised, no further comments. Okay, in that case, I am going to close the public comment period, bring it back to the council. There were a few questions that, for example, Mr. Wood had a question about what would happen to the $14 million. And several people asked that if this project were delayed or if the project were moved, if it moved from this site, what would happen to the $14 million if this project were to move? So I guess either staff or Ms. Mandolini, Mr. Spence.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So there are a couple of issues associated with the funding. One is the funding requires site control. And so the city does have site control over the existing property. The property on the north side of Railroad Avenue has several different owners. There are 5 or 6 parcels there. Some of them have tenants within those buildings. And so you have to go through the process of acquiring properties. We don't know if the property owners are willing sellers. You'd have to relocate tenants. And so certainly that would take some significant time, we anticipate. That is one of the challenges. And so if you wanted to try to move the project and keep the 14 million, certainly you'd have to go and ask the county. If you didn't have site control, that would be a significant challenge. So we do see a challenge there relative to those properties on the north side of Railroad Avenue. And similarly with the tax credit financing, there is a window of opportunity to apply for those tax credits. They open up each year in March and then again in June. And as Linda pointed out earlier, it's a very competitive process. And so we have a lot of projects throughout the Bay Area applying for those projects. And so projects, they do like to have 2 opportunities to submit. Eden is hoping to submit in March of this year and again in June. They have asked the county for an extension to the permit, the funding that they have, the A1 funding, but it's not clear yet if that extension is going to be approved. And if it is approved, it would likely be for less than a year. So the timing relative to the properties across the street is troubling from that perspective in terms of whether you'd even get an extension and then whether that's enough time. And then there's also the challenge of applying for the tax credits in a timely way.
Okay, so we have an opportunity to turn $14 million from the county, the A1 funds, into a $72 million affordable housing complex. Mr. Libkind asked if any other alternative sites were considered. And it's my understanding that we bought this site specifically, and it's actually a couple of other speakers pointed out that this site was purchased with affordable housing funds, with the intention of putting affordable housing on this site, and that no other alternative was presented during the steering public input process because the city did not own another site. Is that correct?
Right. The city owns this site. We actually borrowed money from the state. So there was a state loan involved as well in the existing site. And if the city acquired additional property someplace else and didn't build affordable housing here, you'd have the issue of the state loan. We'd be out of compliance with that. And then you'd also have to pay back the Affordable Housing Fund. We spent over $14 million acquiring property with housing funds here in the downtown Livermore Village project site.
Right, okay. And let's see, so we're talking about moving the, again, same problems if you tried to move it. I know several people have spoken to the fact that, and I don't want to speak for Mayor-elect Warner, that he had spoken to looking at some of the alternatives. Again, we're talking about $14 million being leveraged into $72 million. I haven't heard any of the speakers suggest where that funding might be made up. So if in fact we were to lose that $14 million because it's moving off of site, no one has suggested where that money would be made up. So something I find very, very troubling for me right now is a number of the speakers tonight talked about an alternative plan. Now, we just came through a very divisive, very brutal election on Measure P, which dealt with this site. And over again, we kept hearing about this alternative plan. There is no alternative plan. This is the land that was purchased by the city with affordable housing funds where affordable housing would be built. Now, we've been able to move some of that housing off of this site, but that's what the site was purchased for. And yet I've heard a lot of people talk about this alternative plan. There is no alternative plan. There is no alternative site. This is the site that we're talking about. And what is really, it's like Yogi Berra said, deja vu all over again, is just like we heard with the hotel, which was proposed for this site. One of the speakers today said that that they're working with organizations, but they can't disclose any information about them. That's what we heard about the hotel, that there was this hotel developer that was going to come in, but we couldn't learn any information about them. And I'm very troubled that as we're talking about this same site, we're hearing the same thing that we heard the last time. There is no alternative plan. And to hear that there's an organization, but we can't learn anything about them because they can't disclose any information. I'm sorry, that's just very disingenuous. It shows a complete lack of consideration for the plan and a lack of the consideration for the process. If you've got information about making up the $72 million in funding, then tell us. If you don't, then you do not have an alternative plan. The city has an approved plan, just like the planning commissioner, Ms. Bonanno, pointed out. This is the plan. There is no alternative plan. So we've answered some of the questions. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the council for their comments. Let me move over here. Comments from the council.
If I might start it off here.
Councilmember Coomber, yes.
You know, I was sitting here and had to turn off my video. It was frightening to hear this about moving housing at this late date with a year to go, essentially, before we lose this funding. And with absolutely no plan for where the city will find the money to acquire 6 private properties north of Railroad Avenue, and then re-engage whoever, whether it's Eden or anyone, to come in and do this, build this project elsewhere. I mean, does anybody think anymore? I mean, honestly, I cannot understand how you could come up with, you have to acquire the property. You have to acquire a builder, a willing builder, I'll say. And after Eden Housing goes through this and gets, I don't know if they'd be willing. So it's very frustrating to hear this from people I had a lot of respect for at one time, and to come forward and at the last minute throw this thing out there that there's an alternative plan. It's like, where were you? When did this all start? Well, long before I was in office, and it got hashed out and narrowed down. Many of these people pushing this alternative plan were on that 19-member committee early on in the game. And now all of a sudden, there's time for an alternative plan. You better look at the loss of funding and the short time frame to keep it intact and understand that we've got to move on this. Thank you.
Councilmember Monroe, followed by
Right.
Councilmember Carling.
So, yeah, so I have a little bit to say. First of all, I just wanted to compliment this workshop format in particular. I mean, what we do for workshops is to get feedback, but it's also a matter of education. And I felt that the way that all participants, all presenters presented the material was extremely helpful. I appreciated, in fact, could we get a quick look back at the lack of housing? I think it might be, just good to remind ourselves of where we sit with regard to how difficult it is to build housing and what our waiting list looks like. Can we do that really quickly? And while you're looking at that, I'll just go on to say, looking at what the funding is, which we've already addressed in detail, I thought was really helpful. Moving from there to looking at the evolution of a plan from a vision to a reality, what works and what doesn't work, and how it is that changes need to be made. I thought that was extremely well done. With all of that, I am surprised to hear so many people say, golly gee, what we need is a park. We just need a park. Because after we've heard of the need for housing, after we've heard of the careful design, after we've heard of the money, of the timeline, I guess I'm wondering why we're still talking about it. That said, I'm going to keep going because I have a few other things to add. First of all, I wanted to, I thought the area for the children's park, and by the way, as a parent of a grown children and a grandparent, one of the things that my granddaughter, who was then 6, said at the city council, she's now 9, so moving along, continuing to move along here in time, was she wanted a playground. We have an opportunity to put that playground where that hardscape is. I love the fact that Alan Burnham said we need something about trains. I think it would be fantastic if we could incorporate trains and a children's park in that area. You want ideas? There you go. That's right in space. I know that one of the questions that was asked is a question about another exit for the underground garage. I assume there's a reason that there's one exit, but I just thought maybe that someone could address that. And then I wanted to speak a little bit just about this whole issue about what it means to be secure. And you've heard me do this before, but it bears repeating. I've talked about myself as rich, and that means that I own a house. It means I can pay what little is left on that mortgage without worrying. It means that I don't have to worry about where the next paycheck is coming from because my husband's retired. It means that we are secure. That's what rich means in today's world. What we know about this year and what we know about COVID is that people who have jobs where they can work from home, people who have high-tech jobs, people who have high incomes, their lives have basically recovered but for what is effectively inconvenience. We know that for many, many others, things have gotten worse. We know people whose rent has been delayed who will come due. We know that we're coming up on more and more housing problems. With all of that, I find it, I just don't even have words for how to think about what we need now is more park. What we need now is to protect those people who are suffering. And finally, I just wanted to say a word about parking. Somebody made the comment that, golly, it's impossible to imagine one car families. Excuse me, but my family has been a one car family for just about as long as we've been married for 40 years. And I think for 5 of those years, we had 2 cars, and that's because we had teenage children. But we have 1 car. We've always had 1 car. So please, 1 car is perfectly fine. That's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Monroe. Councilmember Carling.
Well, thanks. And I appreciate all the comments, both written and oral this evening. And it's always interesting to hear what people have to say. I thought I'd spend a few minutes, in a sense, supporting what the mayor said, but also reviewing, at least from my point of view, how we got here. First, I want to say I support the design that we've seen tonight, and I'm ready to move forward with the plan that Eden and the staff have put together. But one of the things that occurred to me, and even Mr. Frederick brought up Measure P earlier, I probably participated in 15 or 20 house parties with an average, this was on Measure P, obviously, and with, I don't know, roughly 12 to 15 people at each of those. And you can do the math to see that it was, 150-ish people that I interacted with regarding Measure P. And it was interesting that almost everybody that came to those house parties in which I participated thought that Measure P was a vote for the city plan that you saw earlier versus the drawing that you saw in the independent. I had to disabuse those people that that's not what this Measure P was about. It was about a hotel next to the banquette or not a hotel. Yeah. But my suspicion is that those representatives that I spoke with at those house parties probably pretty much reflect the majority of the people that live in our community. That is, when they went to vote on Measure P, they thought they were voting for the city plan versus the plan in the independent. And do I need to remind you that the city plan for Measure P won by a 2-to-1 majority? So the people in this community want us to move forward. And even Mr. Palajek mentioned that he represents a small group of people. So it's once again a small group of people thinking they can dictate what the majority of this community wants. And the majority of this community wants, from my point of view, is to move forward with our plan. I'm also, I spent some time over the last several years with some of the leadership in this small group. And one of the things that I emphasized on more than one occasion is my opposition to putting affordable housing next to railroad tracks. And that was the plan, if you may remember, that was what a suggestion was made some years ago to put it out next to the I Street Garage, which I opposed. Well, I'm just as opposed to putting affordable housing again by the railroad tracks. And I'm sad and disappointed that this continues to be raised. And I just don't understand that. And as my colleague, Councilmember Monroe said, you're talking about parks versus housing of people. The problem we're trying to address in our community is housing. And you know that this is not just in Livermore, it's Alameda County, it's this state. And if you look again back at the timeline, we approved this in 2018. And Ms. Mendolini talks about open for occupancy in 2023. If we start talking about now moving this, you're talking about pushing it out another 5 years from now. We can't afford to do that. These people need the housing now. So I'm ready to vote and approve the Eden Housing Plan as stated earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Carling. Let's see, Mayor-elect Warner. Vice Mayor Warner. What's your title?
Well,
what do you want?
Vice Mayor Warner. There are a number of things that I think are worth pointing out here. But I really loved Bob Coomer's comment, does anybody think anymore? I think that's that should be our mantra. So Bob, I really think that was fantastic. So let's start out with a few things. The purpose of this workshop, my understanding, and I'm the one who asked for this workshop, was to expose the thinking of Eden Housing as quickly as possible to the council, so that we could, as well as the community, provide feedback on the design. So tonight we're not voting on we're not even voting tonight. We're providing discussion and direction. And so what the first question is, and there are a number of things, if I may take us through this. The first question is, we have the approved plan. We put in requirements into the approved plan when the Eden Housing was funded. And the question was, that I first have, does what Eden Housing, with what they've come back with, does it meet the criteria of what we said we wanted when we approved the initial agreements with Eden Housing? So that's the first question, I think, to the council. And so what I would request the council member, my fellow council members, to address at some point in the comments tonight, does in fact the Eden Housing proposed plan meet the requirements that the council approved? That's the first one. And in particular, we said the two main requirements that I recall were 130 units and a certain size for Veterans Park. I think those were the key elements of what we requested. And so I would ask Paul at this point, is my understanding correct that those are the key elements that when we gave, or requirements that we gave to Eden Housing?
Yes, that was the direction, and we worked on that through the DDLA with Eden.
So those were was there any other key element in the approved plan that we were requested?
No, the only other thing I would say was general consistency with the downtown specific plan.
Okay, so on those three things, the general consistency, the size of Veterans Park, and the number of units, has Eden Housing come back? Does their plan meet the requirements from your point of view?
So from staff's point of view, we would say yes. And the park size at about 24,000 square feet is consistent with the original Veterans Park that's shown in the approved plan. The project as proposed meets the density and other requirements of the downtown specific plan, and it does provide a large open space there. But certainly we'd like to hear from
I'm
council.
just, you don't have to enumerate. I'm just saying those are the key points. And I just want to make sure that what I've heard tonight on those key points, the proposed plan back from Eden Housing meets those points. Is that correct? I think the other, say, nuance to the design is the question on the number of units of different bedroom sizes, right? So have I also heard correctly that the size of the units, and in particular the number of 3-bedroom units, had to be increased from what we were originally thinking in order for the financing to be competitive? Is that correct?
That's correct. State tax credit financing requires a mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units.
Okay, so that's one thing. So that was the key purpose of tonight, is because once Paul informed me of the timing for the financing, it was, we need to get a workshop out here as quickly as possible because time has incredibly become time of the essence, right? So there's that. And I'll also say, and there are a number of things to go through, but I did say that I was open to a win-win solution if there was one. And I laid out that it wasn't just number of units that somebody might propose, but it had to leave the city financially whole, and the quality of the units had to be equivalent, and that it wasn't just simply number of units and that some fantasy about an increased number of units would be a increase. Anything less than leaving the city financially whole and the size of the units the same and the number of units is a win-lose solution. But I did say if someone wanted to present a win-win, I was open to it. Who wouldn't be, right? If it's better, why not? Also, I think we have to allude to the schedule. So I will say that I've been working and talking frequently with Mark Palachuk and earnestly trying to see if there was something that would work here. I'll also say, to date, nothing has been proposed that's even remotely feasible. Now, Mayor Marchand alluded to there's some secret organization with a plan, and I remember, I'm old enough to remember Nixon and his secret plan to end the Vietnam War. You know, we know where that went. So the point is, nothing has been presented, but time is of the essence. We have asked for an extension on the deadline for Eden Housing. As soon as we found out that it was so tight, we did ask for that. We don't know if we're going to get it or not. So the point of tonight is to work with all due speed to perfect what I would claim or call Plan A. If there is to be a Plan B, it has certain constraints that it has to meet. One, of course, is timing. But let's go back to what Councilmember Coomer said. Does anybody think anymore? You can do a very quick back of the envelope calculation as to what a win-win alternative plan would have to be. So first of all, and I'll take you through some of the concepts. What's the density per acre of the proposed Eden Housing plan?
It's about 54 units to the acre.
Okay, it's about 54 units to the acre. And what we currently have in the downtown plan zoning is about, what, 50?
55 is the max.
55 is the max. Okay. So and I think that that's a reasonable max. Now take a look at Chestnut Square. What's the units per acre there?
Sorry, hold on just a second. I have that. So Chestnut Square is about 50 units to the acre as well.
Okay.
Just a little less than this project.
Okay. So and in some of the conversations I've had with people, that's kind of like the maximum you would go to. But just for comparison, and it's just a thought experiment, what would be the density if you took the lot that the hotel is proposed for, and it's 130 units, what's its density per acre in a unit of a, if you called a hotel room a unit, what would that be?
Right, that's about 106 units per acre, but of course, those units don't have kitchens or any of the other things you'd have in a unit.
Okay, so just for the audience listening, that's 106 units to the acre if you're talking about units that are equivalent to a hotel room without a kitchen. Just let that sink in for a second. Okay, there has been floated a plan for 106 units per acre north of Railroad Avenue. I don't think that comports with Councilmember Coomer's request that we all think, right? So any other plan is going to be capped at 50 some units to the acre. not double that. Okay. The other thing is that has also been pointed out that the city is not going to buy land twice. So, and as Mayor Marchand has pointed out, we already own the land and it was bought for with affordable housing funds. Any alternative win-win plan has to provide land at no cost. Eden, how much, Mr. Spence, how much is Eden Housing paying for the land for this project?
The city is providing Eden with the land. That's a typical program for something like this.
So any other land that any alternative project would land on has to be provided by the people who want the alternative plan at no cost. Okay, so there is the there's that kind of constraint. Now, the other thing is that as been pointed out, we can't risk losing, and it was said at the outset, and I said that many months ago, there is no way we're going to risk losing the county funds. It has been claimed that the county would be willing to move it to another spot. I've never seen any evidence in writing from the county that they would do it, but if they did, well, that's something to consider. But so heretofore, there is none. Although it's been claimed that the county would do it, there's no ironclad proof. So again, any project proponent for an alternative would have to put up 14.4 million to guarantee that we didn't lose the money. Okay, so it gets back to, let's be real. So if there is an alternative, I'm certainly willing to listen to it, but I am not willing to listen to fantasy. Okay, and we've got to be real. So that's kind of where I'm coming out on it. That, and you know, somebody's got an idea, I'll certainly listen, but heretofore, nobody has come up with any credible idea. So that's what I have to say on that.
All right, thank you. So I hear general approval from the council. There's general agreement with the proposal. The fact that even though the building envelope has enlarged a little bit, the size of the park has not decreased. I'm happy to hear that. But again, this property was acquired before I got on the council with affordable housing funds. So that's always been the intent. And as Mr. Wente pointed out, originally what was proposed was over 400 units of housing on this site. So this has evolved, and I think that it's really turned into a much better plan. The fact that we do have Veterans Park and Stockman's Park, that we can accommodate the affordable housing for the people that work here in the city. I think that's very important.
So could
yes.
One other thing that it just occurred to me. People alluded to the 4 stories, and I think it's something that predates my, I've been in town for 44 years, but I've only been seriously paying attention to what's going on for the last 10 or more, maybe 12. But the thing that if I could, and as Councilmember Monroe pointed out, one point of this workshop is education. So a while ago, and Mayor Marchand, you'll remember, I proposed us dropping the height of buildings in the downtown to 3 stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't get support for that. But I was asking around today as to where did this 4-story concept come from for downtown? in the first place? What's the history of that? So if I could ask Mark Roberts, if you could just say, what was the vision of the people who designed the downtown? And I'll say that some of the people who designed the downtown are the people that are showing up tonight to comment. Where did this 4 stories come from?
When the downtown specific plan was being considered, the community workshops included a variety of information, and some of that had to do with the economics of development in the downtown. The overall plan essentially provided a more compact area for commercial development in the community, and an area of the core, which is what we are talking about, essentially that includes the property that we've been talking about this evening. It includes the property known as the Golden Triangle, where the Bankhead Theater is located, and it includes the property immediately to the west of this property. Those core properties were allowed to be taller. Obviously, on the one property, it was because there were cultural facilities, and we wanted them to be taller than a 3-story limit. On the 2 sites that we're talking about, including this site, the idea was to put the tallest buildings and the densest activity in the center of the downtown. And that's indeed what the plan did. So there's a very limited number of locations where 4 stories is permitted by right. This is one of them.
Okay, and also way back when this land was being purchased, I think as Mr. Wendy pointed out, maybe others, the vision was 426 units, something like that.
In fact, one of the proposals that was included had that many units, along with a combination of a regional theater at one point. So yes, we've had a wide range, all the way from more than 400 units down to the 130 we're talking about today.
Right. Okay. I was just a little bit of context here. And the other thing too, I think I just want to also make sure I understand is I've looked at the evolution of what's happened between railroad and the railroad tracks, that has switched, and when it's been redeveloped, it's gone to housing. Is my perception correct?
The downtown specific plan permits the area north of Railroad Avenue, or between Railroad Avenue and Chestnut, which includes the tracks, to include housing. The area immediately north of this project site, essentially between L Street and Livermore Avenue, also provides commercial uses to remain the heavy commercial uses. And the concept there was that would be to support artist activities in some of those spaces that were too heavy to be combined with residential units or other activities. But you are correct. The area essentially to the north of this site in the plan is cited for residential.
And that most likely is, I just want to make sure, because we're going to be going through the general plan amendment and everything else, that area would be just as Station Square and such like that. That's not retail on the lower floors. It's kind of housing on all levels. Is that kind of what's likely to happen in that region, more likely than not?
It is correct. And in fact, what we did is we tasked with the economists when we did the plan nearly 20 years ago to maximize the amount of commercial activity that could be successful in our downtown. At the time, we had much, much more commercial area than could be supported by a community of our size. And that led us to concentrate the commercial activity into the areas where you see the activity happening today. Expanding that back out makes the existing retail a much less successful. So we did not want to cripple downtown by having too much commercial. And in fact, that's one problem that most communities of our size actually have. We have very few vacant properties downtown. That's very unusual for a community of our size.
And so that's likely to be housing, as people have pointed out. I would suggest, though, that housing density is going to max out into 50 units to the acre. It's not like we're going to be building multiple hotels up there and calling it residential units. So, but where we are likely to have retail and residential, if I'm just want to make sure I'm correct in thinking this, is between 2nd and 3rd Street, those old bank buildings. When those get redeveloped, that's likely to be a combination of retail on the lower floors and residential. But again, that unit density wouldn't be more than 50 units to the acre. Or what? I don't know.
That is generally correct. And as you continue to head toward the south, the maximum density range drops into the 25 unit to the acre range in those areas. But you are correct. The areas between First Street and Fourth Street can have vertical mixed use with retail or office on the ground floor.
So whereas we've said in the original plan, we have this spine of 4-story buildings in that running through that core, north of Railroad, we're talking 3 stories like Station Square. Is that kind of like the concept at the moment?
That's what's permitted by right without a conditional use permit or other changes to the rules.
Okay. So the reason I took people through this is people would wish for a better plan, but it has to be reality based. And so I was trying to, go through the parameters that any alternative plan has to meet. And I would suggest that anybody who claims there's an alternative plan stay reality based and meet within the parameters just outlined. But so far, as I'll say, I haven't seen anything. So I want to go back to, and Mayor, I don't know that every one of the council members has actually agreed, maybe implicitly, that the Eden plan that we saw actually meets expectations. If it's plan A, does it meet the expectations? But there's a few guidance things that I would want to say more about this plan.
Certainly.
And in particular, for my own thing, is want to make sure it's got quality architecture, that it has the variation and exudes the quality. I think we want to make sure that to the extent possible, as it's next to the Black Box Theater and the Science Center, that there's a way to transition to the height of those buildings, that it's, on that edge. So that, so those are some of the other attributes of this that I would suggest that we make sure of, that when this thing comes back to the Planning Commission, that it addresses. When I think the other thing is, when will we actually get to weigh in on the architecture style and things, and what's that schedule?
I think I saw that as February, was it?
So the project, if the council directs us to move forward this evening, based on the site plan, we will work quickly with Eden on architectural concepts. And if you have particular comments, certainly heard about the stepping of units, the combination of 3 and 4 stories, perhaps on the northern building. And so we'll bring this back to Planning Commission, hopefully in January, and council in February. That's the tentative schedule for review of the architecture. And that's consistent with the way we do all of our market rate projects as well. Bring them through Planning Commission and council, and you have those opportunities to comment at that time.
And the other thing with respect to schedule, we always made the commitment that we would maintain the amount of parking, not only at the completion of what we're doing, but during. And I think we have to, hasn't really been pointed out so clear, but a couple of things have happened to us, and that the actual schedule for the downtown plan overall is significantly different than we anticipated just a few months ago. The pandemic has changed the speed at which we'll build, the retail partners will build the hotel. I think the cultural facilities are still on their track, but maybe I don't know what the impact on their fundraising is. But I think what we're seeing here is, because of this county funding and because of the impact of COVID, we're actually seeing the housing is turning out to be on a track many years before we thought about it would be just even a few months ago. I mean, is that right? I mean, it was supposed to be the last phase, but now it's not. It's likely, from what I'm hearing, to be much sooner. Is that a correct impression?
Yes, you are exactly right. Some of our other partners, the hotel and the retail in particular, have slowed, and the housing is being prioritized at the state level. We have this wonderful opportunity here in the short term to access funding, and so the housing has the potential to move forward more quickly than the other components. We are, however, still working on the parking. We are planning to bring the I Street Garage out to bid here in December and begin construction in March of 2021. And then after the I Street Garage is complete, we plan to move forward with the L Street Garage. So we do have plans in place to make sure that we have available parking. And we're also looking at some measures to provide additional lots in and around the downtown during construction.
So one of the things that I would request is this project comes back through the process, that there were really, and I heard several comments tonight about the concern about the parking. So I would say, not only does this thing have enough parking associated with it, and you could show the amount is anticipated in the L Street Garage, but what that means is we want to make sure that the overall parking, when all is said and done, makes sense. And it's hard to know, what to see it now that the schedule has changed. So I would request we used to have charts of parking versus time, and when we're all said and done. So I would like to see that, just to make sure we continue to be on track there for maintaining the parking.
We can certainly bring that back to you.
And then the last thing that I want to comment on, just to highlight and make sure I understood. Council asked originally for a stepping down 4-3-2-1 going east, going from the west to the east. And what's coming back is the step is from north to south. And that's because of the just being cognizant of where the sun rises and sets.
So there are multiple reasons for that. One of them, from a design standpoint, is so that open space remains sunlit even at this time of year. And having a tall building to the south would limit that somewhat. The other item is that it fit very well with the overall funding strategy to have a 79-unit building. And that actually worked very well with the A1 funding. And then the hybrid 9% and 4% tax credit, which is the other piece of your funding package here, fits well with having that essentially 79-unit building and the smaller building to the south. So that's essentially the adjustment. At the same time, as your community development director noted, we do have some ability to make some adjustments to the eastern end of the 4-story building, so that as we get closer to the Science Center, the building steps down in that location. That building will be about a 2.5-story building based on at least initial ideas of what the height of that will be. So we would have a 3-story section of the 4-story building at that location.
And the final thing I'll say is that having looked at the different U shapes or L's and I's and this thing, so I'm okay with this design of all the alternatives. And the other thing is, at this point, we haven't finalized the exact location of the cultural facilities, but is there any reason to worry about that with respect to thinking about this design at this point?
Final location of the cultural facilities can move a little bit to the north or south, independent of your moving forward or giving direction on this project.
And the Black Box Theater could even move to the east a little bit too, as well, right?
Yes.
So is there any, okay, so I think I've thought about this in a number of ways. I can't think of any other comments at this point, but I'm sure as it continues to go, I will. But that's all I got.
All right. Bring it back to the council, looking to see, I see no hands raised. Councilmember Coomber, anybody All right. Thank you for all the information that we've gotten tonight. So if there is any additional information out there with respect to additional funds that may be available, we'd love to hear it. But absent that, I think this is a tremendous amount of work has gone into this, and I certainly appreciate the great partnership that Eden Housing has brought to the city. I see no further hands. Does the staff have sufficient direction to move ahead at this point?
So Honorable Mayor, we received comments from the council about several adjustments to the plan as we saw it this evening. We will incorporate that as direction and then direct Eden Housing to prepare an entitlement package for the Planning Commission to consider, and then ultimately come to the council for final direction and approval at that time. And at that point, you would see architectural details and essentially similar to all of the projects that you review. Separate from that, on a separate track, you would also then later see final design for the park area in the plan, since that is a part of the city's obligation to this. And so you'll have additional time and give further direction on the final design of exactly how that works out. At this point, if that's the direction of the council for us to move forward, to submit a entitlement package for the Planning Commission, I think we've got our appropriate direction. If there's any further direction this evening, we'd be happy to hear it.
Well, we had talked about on a separate track, there was the comments from Alan Burnham tonight and Alan Frank about working with the city and also Eden to, I've heard concepts as simple as just embedding 2 railroad track rails into hardscape. But if they could have a conversation about some sort of memorializing the fact that the Transcontinental Railroad original alignment went right through Livermore, and it was in this area. So just to have that conversation to see if we could incorporate that in this area, that would be helpful.
Very good, seeing if that's the direction of the council to at least consider that as an option for our park design. Literally, the railroad tracks did roll through pretty much what is the middle of the park. So I think it's certainly an appropriate location from there. Your staff will incorporate that into our planning for the area and bring back some options for your consideration and public comment at a subsequent meeting.
Yeah, it's within a couple of feet of where the center stone is at Stockman Park. So, Councilmember Monroe.
I just, you know, the more you're talking about this going right through the park and so on, the more I'm picturing a nice little park for kids that grown-ups could play into, not just asking for a friend, with trains that kids could, you know, it's a thing. It's, yes, please consider it.
Very good. I think there's a variety of ways to manifest the idea that the railroad was here, from art to even how exactly the play structures are designed.
You're saying that so clearly and simply, and I'm planning on playing on it, just saying.
So if I could understand that, you're talking about on the west side of the cultural facilities.
Correct.
Okay.
Just somewhere. All right. Well, with that, closing the meeting. There being no further comments. Hang on a second here. Let me make sure I get to. Oh, you know what? I figured that out, didn't I? Yes. Okay. So we're going to adjourn to a regular city council meeting on December 14th at 7 p.m., which will be presented virtually using Zoom once again. So thank you very much, and we will see you on December 14th. Meeting is adjourned.